Today we're looking at some Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 1st edition, and more specifically today we're going to be looking at experience points, leveling up, and some practical options for characters, as well as a little bit of some of the account keeping side of the business, because we love account keeping. We love to make sure that all our numbers add up. Alright, so let's begin. So to start with, we have our trusty adventurers, and what we've got in this party is a bunch of first levels, and for their first adventure they've gone through a fire sweep where they've cleared out an old temple or ruin of some orcs, and along the way they managed to encounter an ogre, which they dispatched as well, just to sort of clearing out the area. So during the adventure they come up with some different items along the way, as well as some gold, and then you also gain experience points for the kills. So what we're looking at is a longsword +1 for 400 points, the ring of invisibility they found, and also used, so that's a 1,500. A couple of potions of healing, even though one was used, it doesn't matter, so they still get 400 for that. And that's just the magic items there for 2,300. And along the way they found 3 scrolls, or a scroll of 3 first level spells, which is equivalent to 300 points. So all up with their magic and items, that's 2,600 points. And now onto the gold. They found approximately, well, close enough I suppose, 3,500. And gems, jewellery and trinkets worth about an extra 1,500. So that's a total of 5,000 in gold piece value. And as the DM, I've decided that it was a pretty rough and tumble adventure, so it was challenging for them because of the type of characters they are. They're not super buff, and they were all very average in hit points. So the rate will be 5 to 1, giving them a total of 1,000 experience points. So all up for the subtotal of the gold magic items, that's 3,600 experience points. Now in terms of the actual adventure side of the business, you got 25 orcs, so that was in total, they were all roughly 5 hit points each. And then you had an orc sub-chief, or a big orc, so that was 11 hit points for a total of 31 experience points, and the ogre, which was a total of 180 XP. So that brings our total for monsters up to 586 experience points. For the total group XP, 4,186. So once we have our totals, this is where we have some options open to us. So option 1, we just say, right, there are 6 characters, everyone gets about 697, and away they go. And those dual class characters, they get 348 on one class and 349 on the other class. So that's option 1. Just nice and simple, cuts back on the account keeping, and away we go. We're all moving forward and making time for the next adventure, and we're all happy. So option 2 is when you just go, okay, well, what I'm going to do is, the cleric came in at some good times, and they used the spells, so there were 3 of them that were used appropriately. So okay, that's 300 experience points for the cleric, 100 points per spell level. The magic user didn't cast anything, so didn't get any extra spells for that. And you know, the Bolrimi, the fighter thief, she did open locks a couple of times and managed to get into some good safe. So we'll go say 50 points for the thief skills. Okay, so that's 100 for Bolrimi. A thief magic user also, so Switch did some thieving bits for 50, and the monk did something for 50. So Sister Tala, she's all good. So that there was no turning, so otherwise the cleric turning abilities will be in there as well. Now, if you're inclined to, you could also just say, okay, well, I don't want to leave the fighters out, so all the fighters that engage in the fighters, you get a few extra bonuses as well. They might get like 25 points to a maximum of 100 points. So all up, each fighter gets an extra 100 points. So in doing this, you're sort of accepting that the experience points will be split between what's on the fighter side and the thief side, or what's on the thief side and the magic user side, which is pretty good if you want to go down that path. It sort of leads to a little bit more account keeping, but where this takes us down is for something like Switch, and say, well, hang on, Switch, you can't just drop your experience points in half and say that you did 50-50 on your magic user and your thief. So what the DM might say is, we'll go 523 and 174. 523 on the thief side and 174 on the magic user side, because you did not a lot as a magic user. Nearly everything you did was swinging a sword, backstabbing, or using thieving abilities rather than actually anything related to the magic user side. And so we place these values inside the experience box counter and how you want to do it. So you've got two ways of handling experience points, which is, I suppose, the key. One is the simple division and then splitting it as required, or you can do the simple division, but then as the DM, just say, do this. I want you to make sure that you're putting it in the right spot. So as you can see, the ratio for working out gold piece to experience points is something that the DM needs to work out based on the difficulty of getting the treasure. If they just stumble across 10,000 gold pieces worth of hoard that once upon a time was a dragon den but is no longer there, or they stumble on a dragon's den that's the dragon's out, and they grab a bunch of gold and they head out, that's not going to be worth as much as if they fought the dragon itself, or fought the beasties that are to get the treasure. And that's where the DM needs to look at it and go, okay, well, I'm going to make a usual ratio of 10 to 1, or if it's a little bit more difficult, 5 to 1, or if it's a little bit more easier, something more. So 1,000 gold pieces is 10 experience points. If that's the case, they've got to get the treasure out. So once they've got it, they've got to put it in sacks, they've got to put it in bags, they've got to put it in their backpacks, and they've got to carry it out. If they don't carry it out, it doesn't count. So this is where the more brawnier characters just load up the sacks with some booty, and off they go. They just drag it out. So for the most part, the treasure is inside containers already. Rarely is it just loose along the ground, but sometimes it is. But for the most part, as a DM, you'll put it in coffers, you'll put it in chests, you'll put it in boxes, you'll leave it in sacks, and so on. I mean, the monsters themselves want to have their own account keeping process to make sure that they're carrying it wherever they go. An untidy layer it's not a good thing. So it's nice and neat with everything placed in an orderly fashion. It just makes it easier. Once you've got the experience points all tallied up, now we're looking at the experience points tables to see whether or not anyone has actually moved up in level. And for the most part, on their very first adventure, they might get halfway, or close to halfway, or a quarter way. Sometimes they will burst ahead and jump a level, but quite often it takes a couple of adventures before moving up to that next level. There's no set number or set value or set range. It's just as the points are generated, the characters can raise to their next score. Once they've achieved the next level, then they enjoy the benefits of that, which is the extra hit points and whatever adjustments to their skill charts, combat charts, and so on. The aim is that within the next couple of weeks, or as soon as possible, the characters will move on to gain some formalized training and finish up their work. So the DM needs to have an idea of how leveling happens, and this is one of those areas where the DM should already have an idea of how it progresses. So that usually involves time and gold pieces. So how many gold pieces do they get? What can they sell magic items for? And then they can do that sort of thing. It's a way of balancing it so that they just don't hoard everything. You'll end up with characters that just have hundreds of thousands of gold pieces because they've never been charged a single copper piece for improvement. To move from first level to second level, it can be anything up to 2,000 or 3,000 gold pieces for each character. Usually the thief is going to be one of the first to increase, or the cleric if it's single class, and fighters are in the middle. And this is where the party pull together to work out how they want to do it. If you've got 5,000 GP worth of kit just laying around, you're going to need 2,000 to increase someone's skill level, and it might take a week. So you jot all that down and work it all out. In a campaign scenario, where you want to use the same characters over the next 6 to 7 playing months, and that could represent a year or two or more in game terms. As they increase in levels, they need more time to train. And then once they get to 7th, 8th, 9th level, then they're working out their own areas, building their own castles, developing their own training rooms, and so on. But as you can see, it takes thousands upon thousands of experience points. Now this is where the number of adventures can increase in those middling levels of like between 5 and 9, and some classes will move faster than others when they progress. It's not always evident which ones will do what, but for the most part you've got some that burst out fast, then slow down in the middle, and then sort of tapers at the end once everyone gets to about 9th, 10th level. So here's an example of an entry in the DM's guide regarding the monsters, and all of these are the monsters from the monster manual. We're looking at the orc. You've got just the general orc, guard or sub-chief, bodyguard or chief. So if we have a look, it's a size medium. To hit armor class 0 is 19, armor class is 6, 1 attack, one hit dice, 1 to 6 all by weapon, nothing exceptional, low to average, and then experience points of 10 plus 1 per hit point, with an average of 5 hit points, or 4 hit points. You're looking at 14 or 15 being the average orc in terms of experience points value. And that's sort of what you got to think about. Most monsters don't come with a lot of experience points, so the actual experience points will most likely come from the treasure. Even if we look at some of the most largest of creatures, we'll look at some dragons. Yep, their armor class, their hit dice, they all look rather nice. Breath weapon, magic use, etc, etc, etc. But then they've got these asterisked experience points just here. So for that we have to resort to the chart, because the chart is where the action is. So if we're looking at the chart here, you can see that you go by the hit dice, by how many hit points, and then you add for additional abilities and additional extra abilities, spell use, breath weapon, and so on. Large volumes of attacks, large capacity for attack. and then it comes up with a number, and then for every hit point on top of that you add more. So most dragons, they generally have a fixed hit point per die depending on the age and the size, and that's sort of where the double asterisk comes in with regard to the dragons, because they've got lots of options. But if we have a look at something else in a sec, let's have a look at the Tyrannosaurus Rex. Large. To hit armor class 0 is 7, armor class is 5, 18 hit dice, 3 attacks, has the ability to swallow whole, and if we look at this, you've got 6,550 plus 25 per hit point. Now at 18 hit dice, it's going to have about an average of 70 hit points, which is a lot. That is a lot. But still, you're still only looking at 8,000 experience points or so for killing a Tyrannosaurus Rex across the whole party. So in the DM's guide, we have for magic items an experience point value and a GP value. What this would refer to is when the character comes across such an item, so say for instance chainmail +1, they place the chainmail on themselves and they keep it, then that's 600 points. If they've already got chainmail +1, or if they've already got other chainmail options, or if they're not allowed to wear chainmail or whatever, then they can carry the chainmail suit of armor out with them. Then as DM, you can decide, okay, they're just going to convert it to cash, and that cash, they lose the item immediately. They have to make that decision straight away. So they have to decide whether they're keeping it or turfing it. If they decide to turf it, chuck it back, then there's a GP value. And that GP value has a base of 3,500. As a DM, you could say it's 3, you could say it's 4. Generally, for simplicity's sake, we usually stick with these numbers because they're roughly right. There's no reason to go up or down, but it would depend on the scenarios. If you're playing a campaign where magic is rare, then the GP value of the items may be more. If you're playing more of a high fantasy, then you might stick with this. So as we look down at the swords, it's the same thing there. And swords are special because if we see here, you've got sword +1, +3 versus lycanthropes and shape changes. Alright, so until they identify the item, they'll think it's a sword +1, unless they come up against a lycanthrope or a shape changer. And that actually alters your experience point value, as weird as it sounds, because they don't know what it is. You can't just say, hey, here's 700 XP for the sword. It's a sword +1, it's only worth 400. Okay. It might force them to go and identify it, or better yet, get them the sword, let them do the +1, give them the 400. Yep, there's your 400 experience points. Yep, we'll put that in the tally pool, we'll sort it out later, and then when they identify the item after the adventure, or in between times, you can give them the balance. That's entirely up to you, how you want to do it. So rewarding the experience points is the question that the DMs need to think about. Do we do it at the end of every session? Do I create special waypoints, in effect, so that we get to here and we go, okay, everyone tally up their experience points, because some may go up in level in the middle of an adventure. Do you want to try and hold all of that off till the end of the adventure? Or how do you know, that's the DM's question. And the DMs have got to work that out. So we'll go through some of these maybe one day. But they're all pretty much self-explanatory. Cursed items, most items you got to put on and wear, so things like, you know, scarabs of death. Good lord. It's still worth gold though, because it is a magical thing. So I put the scarab on because it looks exactly like a scarab of protection. Anyway, alright. There's a lot of things that cause death and destruction. And if we look at the relics, they're only got, you get no experience points for them. Because as you get, as any economist will tell you, or accountant will tell you about depreciation, you have a chainmail +1 suit of armor, you're going to get continual value out of that, and it's going to continually help you. Your base armor class has now improved from 5 to 4, even though your base armor class is still 5, but it's natural, you know, it's 4. Then you add the shield, which goes to 3, and dexterity modifiers and so on. So you're going to constantly be getting that. So that 600 points reflects that it's always going to be there, and you're always gaining benefit from it, as opposed to the one hit of 3,500. So with these, most special relics, they've got lots and lots and lots of things. Some of them have some negatives that really cause problems. They've got minds of their own. They want to be used in specific ways. The One Ring will be in there somewhere. Ring of Gygax, that'll do. Alright. So as we can see, Sister Tala, Treasure, Combat and Other, total of 747. Both our fighters have 767 because they gain an additional 10% from their high stats. Switch has 573 and 174. And there'll be times when the magic user gets more experience points, especially once spellcasting becomes a bit more prolific. Bolrimi. And our cleric, Telmac, who walks out with 1,095 with Treasure, Combat and Spellcasting with an additional 10%. As levels progress, at 7th level and higher, you've got Scroll Creation, which can also go inside the other magic item creation for magic users of 11th or higher level, and so on. So this sort of wraps it up, and hopefully I've gone through enough to help everybody out with how experience points work. More importantly, it helped those DMs on how to manage it and what they need to look out for. Putting lots and lots of items out there can be hazardous to a campaign. One shot's different, but campaigns usually you have continuity that you want to maintain. So thank you for listening, watching, like, subscribe, all the usual bits. Let me know if you have any questions. I'd love to hear how people handled leveling up and how people handled the experience points exchange. And there's a little bit of account keeping, whether it was kept to a minimum or whether every single point was tracked and adjusted. Thank you.